Today we're making beef cheek ramen, a dish I can truly say is one of my family's favorite dishes. And it's very simple to make and requires very few ingredients. Let's do it. First, before we prep the cheeks, we make a very simple mushroom dashi. This is dried shiitake. You can use any dried mushrooms, dried porcini, whatever you can find. We simply rinse them under cold water and we top this up with a generous amount of water because that's going to be our cooking liquid. This then goes to the stove at medium heat while we prepare our beef cheeks. Beef cheek is genuinely my favorite braising joint. If I could only use one braising joint for the rest of my life, I wouldn't even need to think before answering this. It has a ton of connective tissues, which when braised through a long period becomes extremely yummy collagen that melts in your mouth. It's a very busy muscle, which means it's extremely flavorsome. So, to prepare them, like any stews, we want to first give it flavor by searing it. Protein, high heat, Maillard reaction. And to achieve that, you want a very dry surface. Now, if you have the luxury of time, salt it, leave it in the fridge uncovered overnight, then you're set. But if not, pat them dry with a towel, but never paper towel. I can tell you from experience, beef cheeks, paper towel, they stick together forever. I don't know why, but it's true. So, very generous amount of salt. With cheeks, unlike all other braising joints, which I often said, don't use a non-stick. The fawn, the burn bits, incredible. From experience, I can tell you beef cheeks, they sear so much better in a non-stick, both in terms of browning and not burning, that I would recommend doing the searing in the non-stick skillet and then switching to the pot for braising. It's a bit of extra work. You'll see from the actual browning that it'll be worth it. So, high heat. Once the pan is hot, high smoke point oil, this case vegetable oil. Be a bit generous because we're going to skim off most of the fat anyway. So the oil encourages even browning. Once the oil is shimmering, cheeks go in. This is the sound you want to hear. And do them in batches to not crowd the pan. What you want to do is you want to press the cheeks down with a spatula to maximize the surface area that is in contact with the really hot pan. This is what's going to give us good browning, good Maillard reaction, what's going to give the meat the meaty flavors. Without this step, you're essentially boiling the beef. Now we check the other side. Beautiful, beautifully browned. Now, once they're brown on all sides, stove off, set this aside, and we welcome our pot for the actual braising. We bring the pot to medium-high heat, and we prepare our very simple aromatic vegetables. First, the ginger, which for me is a must for beef cheeks. This is just washed. You can even leave the skin on, and you want them relatively chunky to make them easier to fish out once the braising is finished. So around that size. Similar to the scallion white, which we don't need to fish out because they become extremely tasty. But still, not too small so they don't burn. And of course, we save these for garnish later. Now, to the pot, we add a bit of the oil from the non-stick, but not much, not too much, just to help the aromatic vegetables get started. Now, ginger. And you toast the ginger a tiny bit to remove that harshness, the spiciness, before we add the scallion, otherwise the scallion will burn. And the more raw ginger flavor you want, the less you cook them. We also toast our extremely generous amount of star anise. And this, again, with ox cheek, it's a marriage made in heaven. And toasting any spices help the essential oil from them to be released, making them way more flavorful. Oh, now you can really smell the star anise. Scallion white goes in. You adjust the heat accordingly to not burn them, and at this point, we season with a bit of salt to help the aromatic vegetables, especially the scallion, release their moisture. Now, once the scallion has a tiny bit of color, we add our dry mushrooms from the dashi. You basically take them straight from the stock pot and you squeeze the excess liquid and you add them straight in, just to give them a bit of browning. Each step of the way, what we're trying to do is we're building flavors before we eventually add the cooking liquid. The mushroom dashi and the mushroom will both end up boiling in the pot, but this extra step adds a lot of complexity of flavors. Now, once the mushrooms have taken on a bit of color, browning, extra flavors, we deglass the pan, mopping up all the burn bits with a bit of mirin, Japanese sweet wine. This will give the dish a hint of sweetness, and we take the opportunity to scrape the bottom of the pot for the slightly burned bits. Once the smell of alcohol has mostly evaporated, we start to introduce even more umami. First, with the soy sauce, a very generous amount. This is 50-50 light and dark soy. If you only have one, use light soy. And once again, we cook out the soy sauce a bit to concentrate the flavors and remove a bit of the harshness. This is my bare bone version. Of course, you can add some spices that you like. You can add some salted anchovies. I think try this once and see if you like it. Then you can build different flavors according to your own taste. Now, soy sauce has been cooked out a bit. We add the other umami bomb, oyster sauce. Brilliant. And with all these at the bottom, which will help prevent the cheeks from sticking, we add our beautifully browned beef cheeks. Of course, in the most ideal world, you try to form one even layer, like this. And we slowly incorporate our mushroom dashi. I'm using a sieve just in case there's a bit of sediment. And you want just enough liquid to cover the cheeks. You don't want too much dilution of flavors. Now, we bring this back to a boil, lid on, and we lower the heat to low, about induction 3.5, and we let it gently cook. For beef cheeks, the fail-proof timestamp is 6 hours. If you have the time, let it cool down, leave it in the fridge overnight. That will be even better. While that's slowly braising and you've done some of the cleaning, we prepare our dashi and soy sauce braised daikon. Now it sounds a bit crazy because we just made a mushroom dashi. Why not just cook the daikon in the broth? From experience, the daikon and the ox cheek actually has a love-hate relationship. When they're cooked separately and combined in the final dish, it's the missing piece. It's just wonderful. When you cook them through, it ruins the broth to some extent. Now, of course, you could pre-blanch it, treat it separately, add to the broth. The fail-proof way is to cook them separately. This is not what I eat on a Monday night. You know, Monday night I order delivery. If you have the time, if you want a very tasty beef cheek noodles, this is what you do. So, very simple. Well, not very simple. Saucepan, dashi sachet goes in, and we top this up with water. We'll bring this to a boil, during which we can prepare our daikon. I like to keep them relatively chunky so that they don't break apart. Like this. Now once this is boiling, well, read the instruction on the package. In my case, 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, we fish out the sachet. This is katsuobushi sachet, by the way, yeah? And there's a reason why. Because the fish dashi works so much better with daikon than just a kelp dashi. So make sure you use that. Now, we add a very generous amount of soy sauce. This is light soy sauce. And we add the daikon. Try to stack them effectively. I know it's, again, a bit insane, but this way you can minimize the dilution of flavors by not having to add too much water to it. You make sure they're submerged, and we bring it back to boil. Once we're back to boiling, lid on, low heat, and we cook it until the cheeks are ready. If you have the benefit of time for an overnight rest, even better. So, I'll probably see you tomorrow. Day 2. After a night in the fridge, we have a wonderfully gelatinous beef cheek broth. This is why I love beef cheek so much. Not much fat floating to the top. You know it's going to be tender, but the gelatin is insane. Of course, you know me, we skim off the fat. By the way, this is a wonderful opportunity to portion the dish if you want to. In this household, we like 1 cheek per person, but once you heat it up, the cheeks will fall apart, so this is the time to portion. We heat this up, and here we have wonderful, wonderful daikon, also overnight. Look how much color of the soy and the dashi, the daikon took on. This is honestly one of the most incredible things to eat in general. So this also on the stove to heat up. We boil some water for ramen or noodle later, and all that's left to do, the garnish. I'm gonna tell you from experience, I've cooked this dish too many times. I've not once said to myself, oh my god, I've made too much garnish. Never. So, a whole bunch of coriander. So the stalks, you want them relatively small. They'll provide the contrasting texture to the cheeks as well, to give you a bit of a crunch. Now once you get to the leaves, you can afford to be a bit coarse. You may think I'm crazy, but make this, take a photo, send me a link of the photo in comments and tell me you did not finish the garnish. I'll come and cook for you for free. Green part of the scallion. Now, let's talk noodles. For this dish, what I like to use the most is brown rice udon. If you can get your hands on them, please give it a try. The beauty of this is, it has a very long cooking time. More like a pasta, 10 minutes or 9 minutes on the package. What I like to do is I like to soften it for about 4 to 5 minutes in boiling water. Then I would run it under cold water to wash away all the excess starch. Then this thing goes straight in to the pot to finish cooking. And you'll see, it will go from pale white to brown, absorbing all the amazing, amazing flavors. So this thing, boiling water, 5 minutes. Take our noodles, and you really rinse it to get rid of all the excess starch. Once that's done, we finish cooking the noodles here, and you'll see the changing of the colors. Of course, if you're cooking for a large crowd, you can take the cheeks out, but because we're doing 1 portion, straight in. Of course, you can tell when they're finished by tasting, but you can use the packaging as a guideline. So because it's at 9 minutes, we know. About 4 minutes, 3 minutes, we taste. If you can't find brown rice udon, you could use soba and adjust the cooking time accordingly. Or use spaghetti, I'm not joking. It works perfectly. But make sure you rinse. We don't want the noodles to thicken the sauce. Can you see what I meant by the changing of color? Already, they look brownish. And that really is the noodles absorbing, not just the liquid, but the flavors. Even on the surface. Wow, the star anise, incredible. Now we're good to go. Let's plate one. First, we have our beautiful noodles. Look at the color. Beautiful cheek. Take some amazing shiitake mushrooms. Barely enough liquid. Incredible, incredible daikon. The garnish. Shichimi togarashi. And that's it. My favorite ramen or noodle dish in the world. This is braised beef cheek ramen. I really, really hope you enjoy.